All right. Yeah. Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here with you today.
All right, we've got good. The mics are working. Hey. But before we get going, let's talk a little bit about your organizations, then we can talk a little bit about the work that you're doing right now. So, and Edith, I know you're with Yucca. Tell us a little bit about what your role is with Yucca. And I know that Yucca has been in some really exciting events, especially on the first day of the legislature. But tell us first of all what Yucca is.
Yeah, so I'm Edith. I'm the policy campaign manager for Yucca, and Yucca is led by Black, Indigenous, and youth of color between the ages of 14 and 25 throughout New Mexico. And so we are an organization that is focusing on building youth leadership within our communities, taking part in the demands of climate justice and an equitable and just transition for our communities, and also, focusing on environmental justice and building that with our young people here in New Mexico so they can continue that legacy moving forward, into the future.
All right. And you're the policy analyst, right?
Yeah, I'm the policy campaign manager. So I do a lot of the policy work, which, sometimes will be in city council meetings, giving public comment, or like right now at this very moment, we're at the legislature with our NM Laws Coalition trying to propose different bills so there could be some type of protections for our communities.
All right. And Alicia, I know you're with Pueblo Action Alliance. Tell us a little bit about what you do there. And then Pueblo Action Alliance, I know that Pueblo Action Alliance is kind of one of the young Native groups that's really kind of flourished and gotten pretty strong, especially after the North Dakota pipeline, because that's right after that is when they came together. So tell us a little bit about Pueblo Action Alliance and what you're doing there.
Yeah, of course. So Guatsi Hopa. Hi, everyone. Hope you're having a good afternoon. I'm Alicia Gallegos. I'm from the Pueblos of Laguna and Acoma. And I am the climate justice organizer with Pueblo Action Alliance right now. And Pueblo Action Alliance is an all Pueblo grassroots organization. And we really focus on, a Pueblo-centric view and approach to this grassroots organizing, especially when it comes to climate justice. Our communities all across the state have experienced decades of, climate injustice and environmental racism and, experimentation and extraction. And so we're an organization that came out of kind of like around the time as the No DAPL movement, just because we saw like how huge that mobilization of Native people and allies was during that time. And I remember, hearing stories about this from our executive director, Julia, and Reyes DeVore, who both work there and have been working there since its foundation. They tell stories about how it came out of the No DAPL movement because they both went up there to the Pueblo camp that was there, which is really awesome to know that like our Pueblo relatives went up there to help out. And so they're like, this stuff is happening on our homelands too. We need to see this type of mobilization and effort for climate justice back at home. So let's bring this back home and see how we can build a movement there with our people from a Pueblo worldview and standpoint. And so that's kind of like how we started, and it's been really beautiful to see how the organization has evolved. Like we still are staying true to our grassroots movements and being a part of direct action, but we also really value the aspect of community education and making sure our relatives are knowledgeable and can get accessible information about what's happening in our homelands and who's coming in and doing the extraction and how we can oppose that, and from a point that is rooted in our traditional core values and our values as Pueblo people too. So it's really nice. I'm a part of the climate justice work. We also have Indigenous community defense work that focuses on mutual aid. And of course, we have a youth justice program that brings in young people to come in and help us with this work and see how they can get involved with it. And that's actually how I got involved, was through youth justice. I was a fellow in our fellowship, and now I'm here as a full-time employee.
All right, yeah. Well, and both organizations belong to the No Fault Solutions Coalition. So tell me a little bit about the coalition. What's the work that it's doing, and then we'll kind of talk a little bit about some of the things that all three groups in the coalition, of course, are keeping an eye on in the legislature. But tell us a little bit about the No Fault Solutions Coalition.
So the No Fault Solutions Coalition is a coalition of grassroots organizations based here in New Mexico fighting market-based mechanisms or policy. I would frame it more as policy proposals being put forth to supposedly address the climate crisis, right? But what the No Fault Solutions Coalition has essentially kind of clocked and, really trying to build an understanding in our communities around is what it means for these market-based mechanisms to be put forth to essentially address the climate crisis in the sense of are these proposals actually going to help us reduce greenhouse gas emissions? Are they actually going to address, environmental legacy pollution in our communities? Or are they going to continue the same harms that we have seen for decades and generations? And so I know in No Fault Solutions, one of our biggest fights in the policy realm is hydrogen. And so I'm sure folks have seen like this conversation on, in order to move away from oil and gas, we need hydrogen. And, they're framing it as this one size fits all type of thing. But really, there's a lot of problems with that, especially here in New Mexico because of the question of water. Hydrogen is very water intensive. And then also the lack of proven studies that it's not going to also pollute the environment. As what we know, hydrogen does pose the risk of even emitting even more greenhouse gas emissions that exist. And in addition to that, it's going to be put in communities that are considered as national sacrifice zones.
All right. Yeah, I know that some of the facilities are already being built in some of the checkerboard area of the Navajo Pueblo areas. I know that up north in where's the Molicor mines, which already contaminated that whole community. Now they're trying to do a hydrogen facility up there. So it's real important because we've been pretty much the recipients or the guinea pigs for atomic energy, nuclear energy, and again, we just haven't had the protection that we need, right? And now we're really looking at being the guinea pigs with hydrogen because it's not, as you said, Edith, it's not really researched to the level it should be researched at. And then also the question of can it really actually be brought up to the level of basically servicing all the energy needs of the United States, right? So, and then again, we know that the biggest polluter or the biggest problem with carbons is really the oil and gas industry. So I know that that's hooking up to a lot of work that you all are doing at the legislature. So share a little bit of that with us.
Yeah, and so I think what's important for us to do is as a coalition, because there are various organizations that make this coalition up, and there's people from various backgrounds and professions and of all ages, it really brings all these lived experiences and also expertise together. And I think this is what's really helped us be a successful coalition. We just started in 2022 during that year in the fall of 2022. And so I think what I've learned too is that how critical we are of making sure that these solutions to climate change that are being proposed at the legislative session aren't an extension of the oil and gas industry, because I think that's something that I've learned as well as I've been in this position and trying to understand all these complicated scientific applications in a way, because I know one year, I believe it was last year when we were fighting against the strategic water supply plan in 2023 when the governor, or 2024, sorry, when the governor of New Mexico proposed $500 million to do research on how to utilize produced fracking wastewater to like do hydrogen energy. And so like I think what I learned from my mentors is, that's just an extension of the oil and gas industry. That's not like moving away from it. That's actually expanding how it can still be present on our homelands. And that's one of our main things too, is like we need to phase out of fossil fuels because of how dependent our state is on oil and gas. But these things that are being proposed as alternatives aren't full alternatives. It's like a sneaky way of still trying to incorporate them into these quote unquote greener solutions or more less emitting like energy alternatives.
Yeah, and on top of that, like the strategic water supply plan is a fight that we've taken on for a little over a year now. And I would say our efforts are really shaping the conversation, right? Because they're trying to take produced water, or as Alicia said, radioactive fracking wastewater, and use it not just like for energy, which, like think about it, you'd be inhaling that radioactive component, given the fact that the science isn't fully there for like even consumption. They're proposing it in like agriculture. They're proposing it to use in de-icing the roads when it snows, or even it poses a lot of risk when it comes to transport, right? So the oil and gas industry created this problem, and now they're trying to take public funds to solve the problem for them, even though they are proactively, fracking and desecrating sacred lands for their industry and polluting our communities. And now it's our responsibility to fix that problem for them. I don't think so, at least not with our coalition.
And I don't see any movement in our legislature either to really get creative about bringing other resources to fund education, etc., because that's always the fallback, right? Oh, well, the oil and gas industry brings so much money into the state coffers that there's no will at the legislature. I mean, we've had a democratically controlled legislature for several years now. So I think the work that y'all are doing in terms of educating our people, right, as well as the legislators, but I don't know what kind of success are y'all having. I know that even with the strategic water supply, our governor didn't even tell us anything about that. She went out to Dubai to announce that. 3 years ago, I think it was, that the legislature voted against hydrogen, and she has strategically gone out to really garner those funds to do it. So it's just kind of an interesting situation. So what are you seeing evolve now in the legislature based on these issues? Are we seeing protections for water, or are we seeing more of the strategic water supply that is supporting produced water, or what are we seeing?
Well, I would say that, grassroots-based environmental and climate justice advocates are putting forth potential remedies to address environmental legacy pollution, or just simply unethical practices from the oil and gas industry. Like one of them that I'll plug in right now is a big one that we're hoping to pass, and it's House Bill 35, which is the Children's Health Protection Zone. And so what this is trying to establish is a 1 mile buffer zone, like a health buffer zone. And what that means is creating a 1 mile distance between oil and gas operations and like children's type of programs, so like public schools, private schools, daycare centers, and trying to create that distance, because kids are being exposed to this for like 8 or 10 hours out of the day while they're at school, while they're at daycare. And as of now, there are oil and gas operations in their playgrounds, in their backyard, or even when they're walking home from school, they are in proximity of that. And so that's like setting up our kids to not be successful, because as they're inhaling these toxic pollutants and these toxic contaminants, or it's in their water, or it's even in the soil in which their food might be grown, the state, our policymakers are actively making the choice to essentially put them in the line of, health impacts throughout their life, right? Like potentially cancer, potentially asthma, these struggles that they're just going to be facing for the rest of their life, and even may continue generationally. So we're hoping that the setbacks bill passes so we can create at least that 1 mile between oil and gas operations and schools.
And as you're talking, and Edith, we know that basically all of the polluting and contaminating industry has historically been placed in our communities. So it's like a continual kind of, just a continuing plan of this country to really make sure that the poisoning continues, right?
Yeah.
So are there some other bills that kind of help with any of these issues, or?
Yeah, there's also two other ones that we're trying to put forth. It's House Bill 33, which is looking at air pollution, ozone air pollution, and particularly in areas where the pollution might be really high. Like in the Permian and San Juan Basin, I know that the American Lung Association has given them an F rating for air quality. So that's
they're competing with Albuquerque.
Exactly, right? It's the impact of oil and gas operations essentially being outside of air quality standards, and people are being exposed to that, right? And in Albuquerque, I know that part of the issue is we are a car-built city. It's not as accessible to communities as the way as like New York or DC are, where they're walkable and people don't need a car to get to a place. It's also like that's a legacy of the oil and gas industry, is creating car-dependent cities. But this bill, House Bill 33, is essentially looking to not allow for new oil and gas operations, putting a pause to fracking operations if they are out of compliance of air quality regulations.
And that's a problem too, because there just are not enough people out there to really monitor what they're doing. So, that's a major issue, because even though we're always fighting the EPA or the New Mexico Environment Department or whatever it is, and we need to do that, but yet at the same time, they're not getting the funding they need to really check on these polluting industries. And again, there's the will at the legislative level, the basically the folks that are doing the laws to really do that. So it's do you see any kind of? I know that with the state land office, they've proposed a bill also to raise the fees for the oil and gas industry, which the legislature has refused to do. They want to raise it to 25% as opposed to 20%. Do you see any movement in that bill? Or if you're not involved with it, that's all right too. I know that was a bill that I was thinking, well, that should help a little bit, right?
I will say I'm not fully tracking that bill, but I know trusted partners in our coalition are, and they have mentioned that they're in full support, because as of now, the oil and gas industry comes in, they reap all these profits, all these benefits, and our community see very little of that money. Like, think about it. This money goes to all these Wall Street investors. Meanwhile, people here in New Mexico are struggling to keep a roof over their home, or even struggling to put food on the table. Meanwhile, they're just coming in and they're taking all this oil, all this gas, reaping all these profits, and also leaving our communities to suffer.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of, just contradictory that this money's supposed to be going to education, where we're not seeing it, right? The Martinez-Yazzie case is still a major issue. I'm not too sure what they're doing with the money, because there's money basically directed to the Martinez-Yazzie case, but I don't think, again, there's really a will to really look at what's going on, right? I know that even a few years ago, it was like, if we're dealing with Chicanos, Mexicanos, Black students, Native students in this state, we need people at the helm that understand those cultures and those peoples, right? Mm-hmm. I thought it was pretty interesting during COVID, or right around the time of COVID, they hired a black man from Florida, and nothing against the black man from Florida, but it was like, wait a minute. How does someone from Florida that has no clue about the culture of New Mexico come to New Mexico, and they're the head of and then of course he ended up staying in Florida because it was during COVID. So, so that was just a failure in itself, right? But it's, I think when you look at the, education in New Mexico, there's always been pretty much white folk in control of the curriculum. And I think that's part of the problem, right? Mm-hmm. But, And then it's lobbying also, because I'm sure you all now, if you've been going to legislature, you already know the mining lawyers, the PNM lawyers, because let's be serious, PNM, even the County Association of Counties and the Municipal League aren't necessarily out protecting our rights, right, and our health. So, that's just my own take on the legislature oftentimes, but okay. So,
speaking of lobbying, you're going to have an Environmental Justice Day on Friday, March 7th in Santa Fe at the Roundhouse, the state legislature. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, and so March 7th is actually our No False Solutions Day at the Capitol and the Roundhouse. This is, something that we saw important to bring to the Capitol in Santa Fe, as we have not really seen a good representation of environmental justice in the Roundhouse. And so this is us, making that space to be able to come and have these important conversations and talk about this legacy of harm that has happened to our communities, and also the movement that's happening at a grassroots level to address it, and how this grassroots level also needs to be heard and incorporated within the legislative session to be reflected in these bills that we're advocating for. And so for this day, you can expect to see a good lineup of speakers who have been in the movement for a long time, but also younger youth perspectives that have, their lived experiences to contribute as well. And we'll also be trying to incorporate, of course, like music and different things like that. Yep.
Food.
Food. We'll definitely have food. These are all things that bring community together. And that's what we really value, is we want to take care of each other. We want to be able to have a livable future and a healthy environment and have healthy bodies like ourselves. And that's why we're so invested in this work, is because that's what we value. And we don't want to see that being exchanged for profits, and see that being sacrificed just to, to say it's good for the economy, quote unquote. And so I think that's also why, it's been important to incorporate and have our voices heard as Pueblo people within this coalition as well, is because we're always going to stay true to our values of we don't want to see what we deem sacred commodified. We don't want to see our water commodified and a price tag on it. We don't want to see our air we breathe, being exchanged for profits. So it's been really awesome to work in coalition with everybody in the No False Solutions coalition, just because we all have those values and we see how important it is. And so that's something you can look forward to. Please join us on March 7th. It'll be from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. and come up.
All right, in the rotunda, right?
Yes.
All right, and Edith, I know you all had a pretty good activity on the first day of the legislature. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, and then we'll kind of share anything else that you want to share today with our listening audience?
Yeah. So on the first day of the legislature, Yucca does a direct action. 2 years ago, I know that they did a die-in in the rotunda, right? So lots of young people laid on the floor with, essentially these printed grave sites showing as to what their cause of death was due to climate change, right? That we have already seen. Last year, we interrupted the governor's state of the state address, trying to urge her to call for a ceasefire, especially given the impact of the military-industrial complex in New Mexico, but also as to how that also contributes to the climate crisis proactively at the same time. And this year, we did a street shutdown, and we painted a mural on the street, which was so exciting. Mm-hmm. And I'm so glad that PAA and NFS were able to be there and support, because we wanted to essentially display the urgency that we're seeing with the climate crisis and with the inaction with our policymakers at the legislature, right? We know that they're constantly appealing to the oil and gas industry. We know that these lobbyists are essentially paying $5,000 meals for them. I can't compete with that. I'm a young person in New Mexico, the most I can do is I can offer you our truth. A burrito, ¿verdad? Yeah, exactly. And so what we did is we shut down essentially old Santa Fe Trail, and with a lot of grassroots artists, they helped our young people that we brought out paint this clock. And so it was a picture of the globe, and on the globe was a clock, and on the bottom of it said "Time's Up," and the globe was on fire, and the little arms for the clock, they were essentially oil and gas wells. And so we really wanted to make it a message, given that we're in 2025, the oil and gas industry is celebrating these record profits. We've been given a deadline by global scientists everywhere that we have until 2030, 5 years, and there's no movement in trying to come up with creative, just and equitable ways to phase out the fossil fuel industry, or even phase out our dependence as a whole of the fossil fuel industry. So we really wanted to be creative when it came to putting on this action and really displaying the urgency. And so it was really cool because we essentially were marching around the artists as they were painting the mural. We laid on the street as the sheriffs were telling us to get off the street, and we got some cool action shots, pictures, and a lot of young people came out in support, and we were chanting and marching. And I've been hearing things in the roundhouse like, oh, the legislators didn't even see your thing, and I'm like, that's okay, 27,000 people on TikTok did. So even if the message may have not gotten across to our legislators, it did get to the people, and that to me is what really matters, is that our communities know that we're here, we're putting our voices out, and they themselves are feeling empowered to take action as well, whether that's even just simply existing. I think that in itself can be an act of resistance.
So what were you saying about the year 2030? That's when they predict that the petroleum's going to run out?
Not necessarily run out, but that we have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions below 1.5 degrees Celsius. I cannot think of what that means in Fahrenheit right now. I'm sorry. But to essentially try to stay below that threshold as a world by 2030, to make sure that we don't have, something that we can't come back to. Like, they're pointing to 2030 as the point of no return, as in, if we continue as usual, as normal, and by 2030 if the greenhouse gas emissions either remain the same or they're even higher, then there's a high chance that we're at a point of no return, as in the impact
some
of
things
environment.
can't be reversed, just like the glaciers melting, that can't be reversed.
So we are in a lot of trouble, and the next 4 years are not going to be helpful in that. And again, with the Permian Basin being the second largest oil producer in this country, which is in New Mexico and Texas, we're second only to Texas. That's a real big thing. But I want to thank you, women, for coming in. Alicia, do you have any last comments before we go?
I would just say that for the last comments, like what Inedith said is really important, is that, that our people feel like they're being heard and listened to and valued, that their lives are being valued in the land that we stand on. Because I think that's where my heart is too when I do this work, is I want to honor my people and the community that I come from, because I know, I hear stories about how much, because I'm from the village of Powati, and right there we have where once the world's largest open pit uranium mine was in operation, the Jackpile mine. That has really hurt my community, and we still see consequences of that today with the babies being born today. And so my heart being in this work is to protect those people and to protect the land that we still are occupying. Those are homelands. We don't have anywhere else to go to. We don't have another home to be in, and that's a place that we will continue to live on because that's where our ancestors deemed was home. And so I just really want people to know that this is coming from a good place, and that we just want to have a livable future.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in. And I think that's really a good thought to leave with, right? Because, a lot of times in this country, we hear liberals saying, oh, well, I'm going to Costa Rica or I'm going elsewhere. It's like, man, that ain't helping anything. You know what I'm saying? You have to, you have to be loyal to the place where you're at and where our indigenous people are going to go. This is our homeland, right? So thank you.
Do you have a website or contact information for people who want more information?
Yes, of course. You can follow the No False Solutions Coalition on Instagram and Facebook. There also is a website as well for Pueblo Action Alliance. We are present on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. So you can find us at puebloactionalliance.org if you want to check out our website.
And then yucca.org, I'm sure, también.
Yes, yuccanm.org or on Instagram at yucca.nm. So,
And No False Solutions también, ¿verdad?
yes.
All right. Well, thank you once again, women, and keep it up. We need to have people like you out there at the legislature, showing face to those guys and gals.
La
All
lucha
right.
sigue.
Sí. Sigue. All right. Thank you very much.